Howdy, and welcome back to the Sanctified Podcast. In today's episode, I want to journey into the life of Saint Quiteria, a cephalophore with a pretty cool story. So we're going to start right off the bat with a surprising fact about Quiteria, and that is she was one of 9 sisters born around the 5th century, but it's not 9 total sisters. There were nonuplets. It's 9 sisters at the same time. Like, could you imagine being one of those kids and being a part of that family and what the poor mother went through with those kids? But sadly, this is also when the first unfortunate event happened for Quiteria and her sisters. Quiteria's mother was afraid that the kid's father would deem her as a lowly creature, having given birth to, quote, a litter of children, and not just one like a royal family should have. Yeah, this was a royal family in what is now Braga, Portugal. However, the children never grew up knowing this life. As soon as they were born, their mother was ashamed at how many children she had, and she ordered her maid to take them and drown them in a river so their husband wouldn't find out. Now, I'm not sure what she was expecting to happen. Like, she would have obviously been pregnant, and then the king's like, hey, where's my kid? You're not pregnant anymore. And she's just like, oh. But that's just what happened, and it's not really covered what the sort of relationship was between the king and his wife, whether or not he was suspicious of her for doing something, or maybe she just told him that it was a stillborn and she had it buried because she was so sad. I don't know. They're just kind of throwing ideas out there. So the maid that was asked to kill the babies, she did take them, but she couldn't bring herself to murder them. I mean, who could? She asked a monk for help, and the monk and others in the neighborhood raised the children as their own. As a result, the kids grew up Christian, and they were fairly devoted Christians at that. This wasn't in line with the royal family, though. At the time, the royal families in Portugal followed Roman polytheism, not Christianity. So they grew up with a religion different from what their parents had, and this is going to be an important note shortly. But before we get to that, I want to say that Quiteria was supposedly one of the most faithfully devoted of her sisters. She studied tirelessly, practiced the tenets of faith, prayed constantly, and developed a strong sense of devotion to the Virgin Mary. Seeing the faith the girls possessed, the people around them decided that it was time they knew who they came from. And after being told that they were from a royal lineage, none of them wanted to go back to that lifestyle. None of them wanted to go to the royal family. Actually, they actively fought it, and they traveled the nation spreading the word of Christ and breaking Christians out of jail in the process, which I think is pretty cool. This group was successful for a few years, but eventually they were caught. You're not going to go around breaking people out of jail and not be wanted criminals, whether it's the right or wrong thing to do. It still would have been illegal. But when they were caught, they were brought before the king, and he instantly recognized them because of how similarly they looked to their mother. He asked them to give up their ways, come live in the palace, live with him and the rest of their family, and they decided that it was time to live in the palace. But their goal wasn't quite just to live a comfortable lifestyle. Their goal was to get to the royal court. In their private rooms, they still prayed for answers and guidance, though they didn't convert to the religious practices that their father wanted them to. And why would they want to get access to the royal court? Well, that's because it's the spot where they felt they could actually be heard and make a difference for the people around them for practicing and professing their faith. They wanted an audience that they felt would actually listen and be able to make a strong change. The king did eventually learn of this, and he demanded that they cease their practices. He demanded that they follow his religion and that they were to marry Roman men. But they had none of this, though. They were jailed for rejecting this offer, but their faith remained strong even while imprisoned. While in prison, an angel came down to Quiteria and said, "Happy and fortunate you are, for you deserve to find grace in front of God, so that God has chosen you as his spouse. It is God's will that you are to live in solitude in the Mount Oria and there you will exercise in oration and contemplation." This angel then released the sisters from jail, and they fled. The king sent soldiers and search parties out to find them, and some were found, and they were jailed or executed. Quiteria listened to the angel and started a community in Mount Aurea, though, and she lived there peacefully, pretty much doing what the angel told her, to live in contemplation and exercise oration. But she was captured eventually, though. Now, thrown back in jail, she escaped once more with the help of an angel, but this time she brought other prisoners with her who she had converted while in prison. I mean, if you're jailed by your father and she's like, "He threw me in here because I didn't believe in his beliefs," you'd probably be willing to listen to what she has to say. It's almost like enemy of my enemy sort of thing, but she has a little bit of more convincing power because she's had these gifts from heaven to get out of prison. So people are like, you know what? She's probably got some truth to what she's saying. During her second time escaping from the prison, she managed to find Prosin Lastiano, the ruler of Afragia, and she converted him into Christianity, only for him to change his mind a few days later and demand his men find and kill her. They tracked her to her community in the mountains, but as they drew near, Prosin was inexplicably injured, and he lost feeling in his hands and legs. Quiteria saw this and prayed over him. Miraculously, he was healed. But, think about that for a second. This dude wanted her dead, and she was probably pretty well aware of that. He wouldn't just come to her little community with soldiers looking like they were ready to cause a fight and just be like, "Oh, they want to have some food." No, she probably knew what was happening, but she still helped him, and she helped him recover from his injuries, not really knowing that he would change his mind and become Christian again or just continue with his plan to kill her. Well, this time he did change his mind, and he changed his mind for good. But upon hearing of this conversion of a ruler for a nearby kingdom, the king, Quiteria's father, was furious. He once again ordered his men to find her, but this time he would make sure that she could not do any more work against him. The king's soldiers did find her and her sisters Marina and Liberata at Air-sur-l'Ador church, but the sisters fled into the mountains. From there, they waged a brief but impressive guerrilla war against the soldiers and the Roman Empire, at least to the best of their abilities. And that's pretty funny / awesome. I don't think it would have been very typical for women to be engaging in guerrilla warfare in the 5th century. So it's pretty impressive that they were this devoted and this dedicated to their cause. Now, eventually the soldiers were sent with dogs to hunt down the sisters, because that's about the best way to track somebody, especially in that time period. The search party found her, but the dogs they used to hunt them down suddenly became very calm after she spoke to them. The men were confused, but they still took her to the king because that's what they were ordered to do. And the king ordered to have her beheaded. He also ordered that every other one of the women in her community be beheaded as well. After Quiteria was beheaded, she was thrown into the sea to be lost and forgotten about forever. But it is said that after being beheaded and thrown into the sea, that she was seen walking up from the sea to the hall of the Church of the Virgin Mary carrying her own head. And for that, she's a cephalophore, like Saint Denis. And there also used to be relics from her that were kept in Area and Gascony, but they were sadly scattered by the Huguenots and mostly lost. A quick fun fact about Saint Quiteria is that there's still a bridge that farmers from Spain and France will lead their livestock over to this day, because it's believed to hold a relic or some sort of blessing from Saint Quiteria, and it'll keep their livestock safe from disease. Another fun little website that I came across during my research of Saint Quiteria was called retablos.ru, and it's pretty much dedicated to people who prayed to Saint Quiteria for protection or thanked her for protection that they believed came from her. And these are stories like somebody was riding along their horse with their young child, and they bumped a tree, and the tree had a big old wasp nest on it, and The wasps got angry. They prayed to Saint Quiteria for protection, and the wasps never came and stung them. They were buzzing around, but they didn't do anything. Or another one where there's a couple of people being chased by a bull through town, and they somehow accidentally knocked over some spinach that was being sold, and the bull stopped chasing them to eat their spinach. And they thanked Saint Quiteria for keeping them safe from the bull. And it's just a bunch of interesting stories like that. It's fun to skim through. There's some illustrations of it. Now, they are pretty much all like in Spanish or maybe Portuguese. I know those are pretty similar languages, and I'm not perfectly fluent in either of them, but the images have little blurbs below them in Spanish or Portuguese, and then a translation to English. And it's just a fun website. If you want to check it out, you're more than welcome to read over a few others that are kind of fun or interesting. And one final thing I want to add before we get into the closing remarks about Quiteria is that her sister Liberata became a saint herself and is the patron saint of Sigüenza. Another of Quiteria's sisters has a legend surrounding her death, and the sister Eumelia was cornered on a cliff by the king's guards and dogs, but she threw herself onto the rocks below because she didn't want to be captured. The rocks swallowed her up, and where she would have landed, a spring came forth. And I suppose it's important to include those to kind of demonstrate that the whole family has a pretty strong connection to their faith. And Quiteria has another miracle that is attributed to her, and it was protecting villagers against a terrible plague in Cutanculi, and those who prayed to her were spared from death by the plague. As a result, a large church was constructed in her honor in 1914 in Cutanculi, and it's still there to this day. They just recently had their big 100-year sort of anniversary of the construction of the church back in 2014. Saint Quiteria's feast day is May 22nd. She's the patron saint of Mesa, Arancuer, Higuerelia, and for protection against rabies. She is frequently depicted carrying her head or with a dog by her side because of her stories about calming dogs or keeping rabid dogs at bay. And as always, if you found this interesting, I encourage you to share it, talk about it, leave something in the comments. I love to hear your thoughts on Saint Quiteria and her guerrilla war with her sisters against the Roman Empire. I thought that was pretty awesome in itself. You're welcome to support the channel, the show, by leaving a like, commenting, subscribing, sharing it with those around you if you found it interesting. It's available on a few podcasting platforms, Listen Notes, Apple Music, Amazon Music. I have a channel on YouTube. If you have a saint that you want me to check out, you can email me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me. And that was Saint Quiteria. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a wonderful day.